The thoughts, opinions, and general overall shade thrown on High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers and not those of High at 9 News, its audience, or its advertisers. The statements made do not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice, and for advice tailored to your specific situation, please consult with a licensed professional. Welcome to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebrities and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and entheogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your host, Jason Beck, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country, and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time and high noon on the East Coast. And thank you all for getting high at 9 with us. Yes. Good morning, everybody. That's right. It is Tuesday, October 21st. Oh man, this is pretty interesting, you guys. Pretty interesting. Today, it's National Apple Day. It's not just for computers, apparently.
An apple keeps the doctor
That's what
away.
they say. That is what they say. That is what they say, Shaun. Right. Oh man.
Everybody go get an apple and make an old-fashioned bowl.
Oh my goodness, I am so excited because this is great. Today is also Back to the Future Day.
That's a good one. I dig it.
Yeah, Back to the Future.
Let's go, Doc.
It's funny. I was having a meeting with someone yesterday, and I was telling them, I was like, hey, you know, I gave you a nickname, right? They're like, what? They're like, yeah, I gave you a nickname. I said, I call you Doc from Back to the Future. And so I actually have to go and have a meeting with him later today after the show. And so I'm going to go and let him know that today was actually Back to the Future Day. He's going to get a kick out of that. It's also National Witch Hazel Day.
It's an astringent. It's good for you.
Yeah. You know, I just feel like it's a bad name for it. Witch Hazel.
Witch Hazel?
Yeah. It's a terrible name. Makes me think of like the Salem witches, like a witch hunt.
Yeah, maybe the witch hunting was the bad part of it, not really.
I don't know. Michael, you ever use witch hazel for your sunburns?
Witch hazel on the boys' skin all the time. It's good for acne.
I think you're on mute, Michael. And let's see. It's also National Pharmacy Technician Day. National.
Yay.
Yeah,
Tax.
yes.
They save you from having to hire a pharmacist if you're a medical operator.
I was going to say, shout out to drug dealers. All the pharmacy technicians. Yeah, that's what they are. Drug dealers. Pill pushers. It's also National Reptile Awareness Day. Is that for the vril? Is that why that's there? For the vril? Do you know what the vril is? Shaun?
Is that the frill?
The vril, V-R-I-L. It's the lizard people.
Oh, I don't know. I don't follow lizard people.
Oh, yes. It's also National Pumpkin Cheesecake Day.
Delish.
Pro-Life Day? Yeah. I'm with that. Of Silent Solidarity Day. Interesting. Well, thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It's also high noon on the East Coast. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. You can look up above and down below to see exactly where we live on the internet. And we are live every Monday through Friday on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, X, Instagram, Facebook, Kick, as well as on our very own website at www.high9news.com. So welcome to everyone joining us from any one of those platforms. And oh man, you guys. New York, the gift that keeps on giving, because officials move to ban cannabis producer that allowed brands to skirt the law, you guys. That's right. The license of Omnium Health could be revoked after an investigation found that it let other companies use its facilities in an illegal agreement, you guys. New York regulators moved on Monday to shut down a cannabis company on Long Island after it allowed some of the industry's biggest brands to make products at its facilities without the required licenses. Under a furtive agreement, the company Omnium Health rented out its licenses to unvetted businesses from outside the state, providing them with an illegal backdoor into New York's regulated market. The state's Office of Cannabis Management said, and officials filed administrative charges seeking to strip Omnium of its licenses to make and distribute cannabis products, impose millions of dollars in fines, and ban the company from New York State. Omnium received rent and royalties from the companies and passed their work off as its own. The practice, known as reverse licensing, is illegal in New York and raises questions about the safety of those products made without the proper oversight. In the biggest recall to date, the office ordered Omnium to take back about $30 million worth of cannabis products made in its buildings and sold to licensed dispensaries. Felicia A.B. Reed, the acting executive director of the office, said, Omnium's conduct is a blatant breach of the licensing rules designed to ensure transparency and fairness in the legal market. Our state's cannabis laws are clear. Licenses are not transferable, and only licensed operators may produce and distribute cannabis, she said. Representatives for Omnium did not immediately respond to phone calls and emails seeking comment, and the company can challenge the charges in an administrative hearing overseen by a judge at the office. The action came after an 8-month investigation into Omnium and a middleman processor license to make its own line of products and those of other companies in New York. The investigation ensnared some of the industry's biggest brands, including Stizzy, Infused, and Gron. Officials said the investigation was still active and that additional cases could be filed against those companies. In between January and August, consumers purchased more than $65 million worth of vapes, joints, and edibles and other items from 17 brands that are or were made at Omnium sites. Over that time, those products made up 6.2% of the more than $1 billion in sales in New York, according to Headset, a sale tracking platform. The office proposed a $1 million fine against Omnium, and if the company does not contest the charges, however, state law allows officials to collect as much as 3 to 5 times the retail value of the products. Omnium was founded in 2014 as a manufacturer of dietary supplements and cosmetics. The company branched out into hemp sales in 2018 and then cannabis in 2022, becoming one of the state's first licensed processors. The Office of Cannabis Management featured one of Omnium's founders in an ad campaign in 2023, emphasizing the safety and social justice benefits of buying cannabis from licensed sellers. Now the agency is seeking to bar the company from New York for at least 3 years and destroy all the products made in its facilities. When the investigation began in April, the retailers pulled about $30 million worth of products, mainly from Stizzy, a California company that is the best-selling cannabis brand in the country. And Infused.
Is it?
Yeah, and Infused, a top seller out of Washington State. But stores had been allowed to continue selling brands like Gron, a top edibles company from Oregon, and Cookies, a popular brand that started out in California's illicit market. During the investigation, Omnium could not provide records that fully accounted for how and when products were made, an official said in a document previously obtained by the New York Times that outlined investigators' initial findings. But yet officials said they had no evidence that the products made at Omnium were unsafe for consumers. They left it up to retailers to accept returns or the items from their customers. But reverse licensing is permitted in some states and widely used in the cannabis industry, but the practice is illegal in New York, and where state regulators have sought to level the playing field for new businesses competing with deep-pocketed companies that have gotten a head start in other states. Gron's founder, Christine Apple, has claimed that her company was one of the first to use reverse licensing in the cannabis industry, starting in Arizona and eventually expanding into New Jersey and New York. The agreement allows companies to cut through bureaucratic hurdles and jump quickly into new markets, which are fragmented from state to state because of the industry remains illegal at the federal level. Reverse licensing makes it harder for regulators to exercise oversight of the companies that make legal cannabis. But Mac Huber, the president of the Empire State Manufacturers Alliance, said he hoped that the state's action against Omnium would send a message to any other companies operating a similar scheme. His company, Heirloom, the cannabis arm of Beak and Skiff Apple Orchards, had rejected partnerships with out-of-state companies seeking the same type of arrangement, he said. The office's decision to revoke Omnium's license sends a necessary and powerful message that the New York cannabis industry is open for business only to those who will uphold their responsibility in bringing quality, safe, transparently marketed products to its millions of consumers. It is unclear if the agency will take any action against the brands that no longer use Omnium's licenses, and since the start of the investigation into Omnium, Stizzy and Gron have both obtained licenses to make their own products, though Gron continues to rent space in Omnium's facilities, and Stizzy purchased its own factory in central New York, while Infused moved to another licensed processing facility. The office ordered dispensaries to pause sales of several Omnium brands after April 20th, the industry's biggest sales holiday, and that left sellers that had stocked up on the products holding on to expensive items that they could neither sell nor return. And some dispensary owners said the prolonged quarantine had strained their budgets. The order was issued as a new congestion toll on drivers this year, and a decline in tourism were already making it harder to attract new customers at Bliss Plus Lex, a licensed cannabis dispensary in Manhattan. And earlier this month, Nicole Lucien, the main owner, said the pause in sales left a $50,000 hole in the store's revenues that forced them to cut spending on efforts that are critical to finding customers, like staffing, events, and marketing. And in a quote, she says, it's a big burden on the business owners to have to keep those items in-house, to not only secure them, but to also not be able to return them for a credit or a refund, Mrs. Lucen said. They have to wait 3, 4, 5 months for clarity on what to do with these products is a little absurd. Well, this thing goes on and on and on. You can read the final rest of this article on our website at www.highat9news.com, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this.
This is disappointing. I mean, Bliss and Lex, I actually remember when they launched because I was working on their PR campaign. They were one of the first equity license applicants, I believe, to really get started in New York, and they have a beautiful storefront. I know that they're not deep pocketed. They're normal folks trying to build a business. They're normal folks. They're not a big name brand like Stizzy, but having those kinds of products on your shelves, I get the reverse licensing, but when you better have a really good lawyer on your team or really good general counsel if you're going to try practices from other states that your legislators in these new legal states or the marijuana states, if they are indicating that they're not going to let something fly and you want to test it, be sure you have great lawyers on your team, because they will make an example of someone. It should be a deterrent to other mid-tier players. Also, for operators like Bliss and Lex, now you don't want to, do you want to carry those products? Do you not want to carry those products? Are you going to make it up by going more local? It's just like regulators are wrong for doing it, for being crazy like this. And the businesses are wrong for thinking that they can outmaneuver the law if they don't have great attorneys. But a $1 million fine is.
So you're saying that if you have a great attorney, you can outmaneuver the law? That's what I just heard.
I'm not saying anything of that sort. I'm saying that we have seen historically. Well, let's let the attorney speak to it. I mean, historically, if you have a good attorney, then the state has to prove their case. If you don't, the state doesn't always have to prove their case. They can slam you against the wall with next to nothing. It's about, do you have the resources to defend yourself if you're going to take actions, knowingly, unknowingly, whatever, that are maybe a little bit in the gray area. Go ahead.
Go for it, Michael. Go for it, Michael. What do you got to say about this? You're on mute. You're on mute, buddy.
Oh, I can hear Mike. I can hear him.
Weird. I can't hear Michael.
Can the audience hear him?
No. If I can't hear him, I don't see how the audience can hear him. Because I can hear you. Weird. Weird. Oh, you know what? Because hold on, I know why. Because they have the mute. You click that mute button. Click that mute button. Click the mute. There we go. Michael, go ahead. Try now.
Back?
Yeah, we're back. Yeah, we got you, buddy. We got you.
All right.
We got you. Yeah. Yes.
So, the interesting thing is this like them coming in and setting up operation using their licenses? Why don't they then just use licensing agreements with these people? And so it's the employees of the dispensary that's doing it, or manufacturer that's doing it, and they're just getting their IP.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they get around it in Florida. And every, dispensary has multiple different brands in Florida that they didn't bring and they don't cultivate or use, but they come in and they use their facilities and they use their licenses in order to do so. I kind of wonder the regulatory scheme of this, or are they really just bringing in products from other states as opposed to manufacturing them in the state? So I would hope with a good lawyer, you could find some way to be able to get around their limited scheme like they did in Florida, to be able to bring in other brands and to have other operators, products and diversity in products and strains and things like that in the New York market.
I mean, this whole term that they came up with, what was it? Reverse licensing. I mean, that to me just sounds like it's a white labeling deal. It's a white, like that's what that sounds like to me. And they're trying to recategorize it and call it something that it's not. Why is New York doing this?
Does sound like a little bit of a more complicated white label.
Yeah.
I guarantee those products are not being manufactured in New York. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to do this. It's too expensive. It's too expensive for these big brands to have manufacturing. This is why when, at the beginning, when folks were like, oh, vertical integration is the way to go when we legalize, everybody should be vertically integrated. It's impossible. I mean, it's not, but it's very expensive. Very few people are going to be able to do it. And those who can, you're going to have a question of quality when it comes to scale. So I get the incentive for businesses to do such a thing, because operationally, you can't be in multiple markets and be vertical in multiple markets. There's just nobody has that. But you're gonna get in trouble. Now, when you look at the percentages reported in the article, though, a $1 million fine when they had 6% of a $1 billion market, I pay my fine and carry on. I would try to stay out of trouble. I'd pay some fines as long as the admission of paying the fine or any admission that can hurt you in the future. Obviously, in this case, it is, because they want to make an example of them and ban them for 3 years. But if it was me, I would try to keep my radar low, stay out of their crosshairs, and quietly pay fines if you don't need it to be a huge public spectacle.
Or maybe you want to make paying the fines a huge public spectacle, like Larry Flint did when he paid it with a million pennies.
Yeah, but that's only if it's going to actually move your line. If it's not going to move anything,
it's going to move the line. It's going to move the court of public opinion. Michael, what do you think about this? Michael, do you believe in just paying the fines and brushing it under the rug, or fight?
I would never pay the fine as they ask it. Obviously try to negotiate and get a reduction in it and see what's going on.
With that.
But sometimes you don't really have a choice. You're either that or you're going out of business, or these agencies do have you kind of by the stranglehold to be like, listen, we're not going to let you operate if you don't pay the fines. So it becomes very difficult, and I'm not familiar enough with the New York system and what they're doing there as to why they're sanctioning and not kind of opening up so people can bring in other brands to sell products on their shelves. Because I do think that is true market. It's a free market. That's we live in a capitalist economy, and that's what it's supposed to be.
Thank God. Yeah, just gonna stay away from those commie talks, and I'm with that, Michael. I'm with that. Asking for a reduction all day on that, and on any fines, telling them, hey, what, this is too much.
Legal taxes, and you're gonna negotiate and all of this. And regardless of if you find it insufferable to get your advice from a Texan and feel we're doing all right.
Well, we don't need to go into all that. We're going to our first commercial, and we're going to be right back. yes. Oh, Michael. I have, New York was where a lot of people live, and then they travel to Florida for the winter, and they call them snowbirds. But a new Florida push for legalized pot, Michael, runs into a familiar foe. Are you ready for this? The last battle to legalize marijuana in the nation's third largest state triggered lawsuits, finger pointing, and a possible criminal investigation. And well, ding, 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 get ready for round two. Because Trulieve, the state's largest medical marijuana company, has already put up nearly $26 million to bankroll an adult use pot initiative for the 2026 ballot. But the new campaign is opposed again by Governor Ron DeSantis, and now there are fresh allegations that his administration is improperly using his power to block the measure from going to voters. Smart and Safe Florida, the political committee sponsoring the legalization measure, filed a lawsuit this past week challenging a push by Florida's top election officials to throw out as many as 200,000 signatures, nearly 1/4 of what's needed to qualify for next year's ballot. The lawsuit was filed after the director of the state's Division of Elections, who works for the Secretary of State, Corey Byrd, called on local election supervisors to throw out previously validated petitions because organizers did not provide a copy of the entire amendment to people it reached out to by mail. The suit calls the actions of the DeSantis administration unlawful and is asking a judge to intervene. In a statement about the lawsuit, the campaign said Florida election officials issued an unprecedented directive and the wrongly attempting to challenge the rules after the fact. Smart and Safe Florida filed this lawsuit to require the Secretary of State to follow Florida law and to prevent the state from denying the Florida voters who signed the petitions to have their voices heard. The campaign said in a statement, "We are asking the court to enforce the law. It's really that simple." The legal challenge comes as a Florida grand jury appears to be investigating what steps the DeSantis administration and the governor's allies took to defeat the 2024 proposed initiative to legalize adult use cannabis. And amid the dispute, another unusual move by the DeSantis administration could also wind up preventing the pot initiative from reaching the voters. In what appears to be a break from the traditional process, the new legislation measure has not been sent to the Florida Supreme Court for a legal review, and despite a state law that lays out deadlines for both Byrd and the state attorney general to act, the court does not sign off on the amendment by April 1st. There are questions as to whether it can make the ballot. Florida has had medical marijuana for close to a decade, but a drive to allow for adult use marijuana fell short of the 60% threshold needed for approval. Nearly 56% of Florida voters voted yes on that measure. But the president, Donald J. Trump, said he was supporting the amendment, but DeSantis, as well as his administration, stepped in to oppose it. But it was revealed after the election that the state directed $10 million from a Medicaid settlement toward a foundation linked to a welfare initiative spearheaded by the First Lady, Casey DeSantis. Money from the Hope Florida Foundation then flowed to two groups that donated millions to the campaign to defeat the 2024 initiative. State Representative Alex Andrade, a Republican from Pensacola, the chair of the House Budget Committee that probed the money shuffle this spring, acknowledged this week that he was subpoenaed by a grand jury to put together by State Attorney Jack Campbell and testified before it. He did not discuss his testimony, though. It was after the defeat in 2024, the amendment that Smart and Safe Florida quickly geared up to try again in 2026, and that revamped measure included changes meant to address criticisms from DeSantis and other Republicans regarding smoking in public and marketing towards children. And the governor said last February that he opposed the initiative. This time around, the legalization campaign started by mailing out a petition form along with a return envelope on a paid postage, and on the reverse side of the petition was a notice directing voters to a website with the full text of the amendment. In late March, Byrd sent a letter to amendment organizers stating that they failed to provide the full amendment to voters and contending the forms were not valid because the website address was on the back. And after his letter, the group did include a copy of the full amendment and provided Byrd with the names of all those who returned forms to Smart and Safe Florida by mail. On October 3rd, Maria Matthews, the director of the State Elections Division, emailed all 67 local election supervisors and directed them to invalidate up to 200,000 petitions In its lawsuit filed in circuit court against Byrd and Leon County, Supervisor of Elections Mark Early, Smart and Safe Florida contends that there is no provision in state law requiring the full text of an amendment be provided before someone signs a petition. While this legal battle gets underway, there are also questions as to whether the state is trying to throw up other roadblocks. Under Florida's law, the state's top election official is supposed to immediately submit an initiative to the Attorney General once the Division of Elections confirms enough signatures have been gathered to trigger a review by the state Supreme Court. The High Court is responsible for determining if ballot summary is misleading or if the amendment does not stick to a single subject. And that review is supposed to be undertaken when organizers obtain and have verified 25% of the more than 880,000 signatures needed to qualify for the ballot. Currently, the Department of State says that Smart and Safe Florida has gotten nearly 663,000 signatures, or more than 75% of the needed amount. And Florida Attorney General James Uthamer, who, while chief of staff for DeSantis, directed the campaign against the last marijuana amendment, told Politico this month that he had not gotten official notice from the Department of State that the amendment had crossed the necessary threshold. And state law says the Attorney General is supposed to petition the Supreme Court within 30 days after election officials verify enough signatures have been received. Politico asked the Department of State several times in the past week about why it had not notified Uthenheimer. And when asked outside a legislative committee meeting on Wednesday, Byrd said that his department had been notified that they were going to be sued over the amendment. And in light of pending litigation, I'm not going to comment, Byrd said. And a spokesperson for Smart and Safe Florida also declined to comment on the delay in the Supreme Court review. And during the last go-around, the Florida Supreme Court reviewed the adult use cannabis amendment in early November of 2023, and the court approved it on April 1st in the constitutional deadline by a 5-2 margin. And DeSantis, despite disappointing the majority of justices on the panel, criticized the ruling. You guys, wow. Round 2, ding, 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 Florida. Michael, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this conundrum.
Well, we've been gearing up this for a while, and each year the legislature continues to try to make ballot initiatives more and more difficult. I think Smart and Safe did already win a suit earlier this year related to some of this. So, this is what Florida's going to be for legalization. We have, and whether or not they're even going to pass it if they make it on the ballot is another huge question. So I think this is going to be continued battle. I think they already have all the evidence to show that DeSantis filtered that money into his accounts and now his wife's accounts in order to stop legalization of cannabis and the abortion ballot initiative that was on the ballot in 2024. And I think this is just gearing up for another, battle. I think it's going to be crazy if they can't get it on the Supreme Court. They took months last time and they just approved it, April 1st last year to let them do it. I don't think it has any problem passing Supreme Court if it makes it. But our legislature just does not want democracy to prevail in this state. They want to make sure that they control everything and they tell people what they can do and when they can do it.
Refresh my memory, though. Isn't there something about this that I remember the culture was not happy. Like cannabis.
Well, yeah, that's the amendment. It's how the amendment was written, and they're not going to be happy with this one either because there's no home grow provision in this, and Florida is a single subject thing, so they have to run a parallel voter amendment to allow for home grow, which I don't really kind of understand in some cases, Michael. And I don't understand why home grow is a single subject issue when we're talking about allowing for adult use sales. And so, I mean, easily in the framework, you could say that, shops are also allowed to sell clones, which people are allowed to take home for their home personal growth and whatnot. And I feel like that would get around the single subject rule, because it seems to me with the concessions that they made, to appease DeSantis in the second go around, I feel like some of those issues would bump the single subject rule also.
So
I don't know.
Hold on. I want to hear Michael first. I want to hear Michael first. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's a question of how much you want to present it to the Supreme Court and make a decision. Let them make a decision after you spend all this money to get the ballots on the thing to determine whether or not they would or would not determine it to be a single subject.
Mm-hmm.
The amendment that we wrote and that I had before the Supreme Court, they didn't really address that issue, whether or not cultivation and legalization would violate the single subject rule. In that case, they ended up ruling that that even though we said limited in the ballot summary, that the amendment didn't actually limit what a person could do with their cannabis.
Yeah.
Which, we think was wrong. And it was the Supreme Court's at that time way to get out of it and have an excuse to justify not putting this on the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it is arguable that you could have them all in the same constitutional amendment. As you were saying, typically the way that the court defines single subject is oneness of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was part of a challenge to the last ballot initiative when they said that you couldn't have legalization and then adult use sales in the same ballot initiative. And the court did find that that was a oneness of purpose. I absolutely think that legalizing and providing for home cultivation is definitely arguably a oneness of purpose. Exactly what you had said. It all relates to the legalization of cannabis under Florida law. So I think that it absolutely could be, and that's just something that an initiative has to take it to the Supreme Court and see whether or not they'll consider it as oneness of purpose or not. But until then, this issue of what is and what is not a single subject is a moving target depending on who sits up there on the Supreme Court.
Well, I would say just let me just say one thing real quick, Shaun, and then I'm gonna have you go. I would say I would argue the fact that discussing where people can consume their cannabis violates the single subject rule. But go ahead, Shaun. Say whatever you got to say, please.
I don't think that the issue was only limited to home grow. I think that the concern also is that there were only certain actors, medical operators, who would be allowed to play in this new adult use space.
Yeah, they weren't issuing new license. Yeah, that wasn't. Yeah, it was just them.
The entire Florida adult use market for medical licensees.
Mm-hmm.
That was also a huge piece of this. Like, am I wrong? But that's what I remember.
No, you're 100% right, and I'll tell you that it was multifaceted. Number one, they had said that people could use anywhere they wanted in parks and public, et cetera, which I didn't necessarily believe was accurate. But the biggest thing was, number one, DeSantis partnered with the hemp companies in the state of Florida and got them on board with fighting against legalization, specifically because of the monopoly type system we have in the state of Florida. We have 23 licenses that are fully vertically integrated. The only way to get into that industry and that licensing was having millions upon millions of dollars to be able to do so. So that was a big death knell for it. I don't really know as far as, so a big part of why we lost was probably the Miami area, surprisingly. A lot of the conservatives down there voted no. It didn't even get over or just at 50% in the Miami area, which is typically our bluest area in the state. And so I don't know if it was the conservative ideas that they were promoting down there that this is bad, this is a drug, people are going to be smoking it everywhere, people are going to be driving high, versus the business aspect of it. I can say that a lot of the people in the cannabis industry, as far as the hemp space, definitely voted against it because of the whole monopolistic aspect of it. And there's no guarantee that they're going to be opening up licenses even under this ballot initiative or under the previous ballot initiative. That would ultimately be up to the legislature, which we know the legislature continues to fight tooth and nail against anything that is cannabis reform, especially opening up new licenses. Even the new 23 that were given out are still conditional licenses and that haven't actually been awarded to the new individuals. There are lawsuits going on to challenge that licensing process again. And, meanwhile, while this is all happening, all the hemp companies in the state are getting dogged and ponied like crazy by the Florida Department of Agriculture and now law enforcement to try to shut them down ahead of adult use, I think. So all of these problems have a huge impact on this vote. And honestly, there hasn't been one ballot initiative for legalization that's passed in a non-presidential election. So it's an uphill battle for that effect as well.
Yep, that's right. Go ahead.
This is why when President Trump said, "I like what I'm seeing in Florida," it triggered a few questions for me, because what we were seeing in Florida, look, I understand how California operators feel about hemp, but the rest of the nation, especially those that don't have a market like California, God bless, hemp has become a viable mechanism.
Trump was not referring to hemp when he made that statement.
No, he wasn't. He was referring to the medical marijuana.
He was referring strictly to the medical system.
But the adult use, what they were pushing for adult use there is really medical marijuana market capture.
I mean, but in all fairness, he did vote.
They can sell medical marijuana to everybody.
He did vote yes. He did vote yes on the initiative.
I understand, but listen, we got to connect all the dots, and we got to track people. We got to track policy and statements through the history of their record, because
he has the best record than anybody else on this.
And it's how you predict what they're actually going to do. So let's look at this. Let's look at it, especially for your hemp market operators out there who do represent almost your legacy market cannabis operators who are trying to either go legal, or your small mom and pops, mid-tier sized operators. And then, yes, some large operators, because the marijuana cannabis operators saw that there was an avenue for national profitability and expansion. And so they went hemp. If we're looking at this Florida amendment, while I understand, like, we're not arguing for democracy, et cetera, by not passing it, let's not frame this as democracy. This is another.
I don't understand why everyone brings up democracy all the time.
Like, what is it? Validating or signing, codifying medical marijuana monopoly by a very small group, and one that we all know and love, right? Truly.
Oh, so you're funny.
We should be very cautious, but I also I feel really bad for everybody out there in Florida, because you're facing 26 million of us infighting, not being able to get on the same page. And wouldn't it be nice if we could figure this out together? I know that's
it's not going to happen. You're living in that fantasy world that you go into quite often, Shaun. But it's okay.
Super tough, because it sounds like Florida, if this goes, is going to be lost to only a very select few.
So, when I say the democracy argument, that's our legislature not wanting the public to vote on it. And then the actual vote is something kind of different, right? Those are the issues that come up with the actual vote, whether or not people support it. But I think the legislature in and of itself is trying to prevent this from happening and democracy moving forward, and let them making a choice, especially when we know that over 56% of the population already supports it. So we're already behind in democracy because we have to have a 60% threshold. There's not one candidate that's required to do that in order to win their seat. So I think that they continue to not listen to the public despite that 56%. Even when we passed medical marijuana by 71%, our legislature continued to try to prevent and limit. They limited smoking. They limited the amount. Now they have this 35-day rule. So it's like this rolling effect. So you never know what you can get when. And, we did have the THC limits. Luckily, the last year they didn't really come back. But those were continuing to reoccur for years in our medical marijuana market. So I think that, at the top, there's a democratic issue where they don't want people to vote on it because they know in all likelihood a properly presented ballot initiative in front of the people, not with tens of millions of dollars spent in opposition on it, will probably pass. And then they would have something out of their control that they don't like, despite the fact that then they can make tax dollars from it, despite the fact that then they could, put more people to work from it. I do believe that as we move forward with legalization, we need to go back to what this plant is. It's one plant. It should be treated the same. And I would hope to think that our hemp operators would have an avenue to be able to get into this industry when legalization comes in, require 21 gated rules, requiring additional, security and different requirements that the MMTCs have. But the current MMTCs aren't even really, from my perspective, abiding by what we considered originally, kind of the first way that they were supposed to be. You're supposed to walk in, you have to meet with the person, you have to show your card, then you can walk into the showroom portion of it. That's pretty much gone away in the state of Florida. 90% of them, you just walk in, there's no one at the front desk, there's no gated door between the front and the back to go and buy the products anymore. They're open showrooms, and they continue to demonize hemp it's getting into the hands of the children.
What about the kids?
I did a little research on it. It's 6% to 7% of the calls to poison control are for cannabis. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous how minuscule it is, and there's no conversation about putting childproof packaging on your bleach bottles or childproof packaging on parents' makeup or things of that nature that the majority of the calls are coming in for. So it's just really a red herring that they get to sit behind and use it as an excuse, when in reality, there's so many other things that are so much more dangerous that kids are getting called and going to, the poison control, calling poison control and going to the hospital for every day. It honestly has been things that they were commercial about when I was a kid. Lock up your things under the sink. Don't put your bleach there. Don't put your dishwasher tabs there. Don't put your laundry detergent low so kids can get it. And it's still the same stuff that's going on today.
Fair enough. Florida is going to be. What's
One
that, Shaun?
question.
Go for it.
Just a question,
Yep.
because I know we have to go to the next story.
Yep.
With all of what Michael just shared, if Trump RX, look, California, Trump
RX,
Newsom, and Trump are competing on similar business
There's no
verticals.
competition.
Hold on. Listen,
even
they're trying to
close.
sell the same idea, though. Trump came up with Trump RX, and he's going to sell that as his Obamacare-ish thing, but privatized probably. And then Newsom just came out with something very similar in California, I think for insulin, which is much needed, but also the government is now supplying this stuff. So let's imagine a world now where if they do have a plan to reschedule federally and they're coming up with these kinds of ideas to get their cut in pharmaceuticals and maybe even cannabis and other things, then would they support Trulieve, who will be their competition, or would they just continue to ignore that? That's what I want to see in 2026 or 2027. I want to see how these medical programs form, and I want to see, did any of it actually move anything, or did they just blow 26 million convincing themselves? Like, that's because there's a longer game here.
There's no competition between Trump and Gavin Newsom, Shaun. There's absolutely zero competition. But we got to keep this train rolling. We got to keep the train rolling. We got to keep the train rolling. We got to roll right into attorney at law, Mr. Michael Minardi. Michael Minardi has been representing patients, caregivers, and advocates for the last 20 years at his law firm, Minardi Law, out in there in the great state of Florida. And oh man, I can't wait to hear this shoot 'em up bang bang story coming out from the great state of Florida is none other than Mr. Michael Minardi with Minardi Law.
Good morning, everyone on the West Coast, and happy high noon to everyone on the East Coast.
Yeah.
We are talking about guns again today.
I love this.
And hot topic.
And Michael, full transparency. We covered this yesterday, but I did want to definitely hear what you had to say, because we did not have a lawyer with us yesterday, and so we can't wait to hear what you have to say about this.
Okay, so I'm not going to necessarily read the article then, but so what people know is that there has been a case accepted by the U.S. Supreme Court to determine whether or not the possession of cannabis alone means that you have to be disarmed and you lose your Second Amendment right. Unfortunately, in the Hamani case, it does provide a little bit difference, because the person had a Glock 9mm pistol, 60 grams of marijuana, and 4.7 grams of cocaine, which led him to be charged in this case. So it is not definitely just about cannabis in this situation, or medical cannabis. This is about potentially illegally possessed cannabis and 4.7 grams of cocaine as well. I think that hopefully with the court's precedent over the past few months, the 11th Circuit's case, which recently came down a couple months, or actually probably within the last month, saying that it should not be an automatic disqualifier for people to have cannabis and guns or medical marijuana cards based on historic traditional positions and what our founding fathers would have done back when they wrote the Constitution as to whether or not they would have historically banned people from possessing weapons and possessing substances, whether or not that be alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, or heroin. It really shouldn't matter. In the prior cases, the Bruin case out of New York and numerous cases across the country, this case has been determined differently. In some states, in some appellate courts, they've determined that they can still ban people from possessing cannabis and possessing guns. In others, like the 11th Circuit, Eastern District of Oklahoma, have all said that one does not equal the other. The historic tradition of banning people who are using controlled substances has been under the influence of the Controlled Substances Act. So not necessarily just like with alcohol. If you're not under the influence possessing a gun and you own a gun and you're possessing a gun and you also use alcohol on other occasions, then it's perfectly fine. And we're hoping that the Canada discrimination will finally end and the U.S. Supreme Court will determine that these are two separate things, that someone who just is in fact a medical card or just possesses cannabis is not necessarily stripped of their Second Amendment right just because of those substances on them. And cocaine.
And cocaine.
And there are a bunch of other cases that are trying to get this up to the Supreme Court as well, but it seems like this may be the one they accept and move forward with.
I was mentioning this yesterday, Michael. I went to the. Are you familiar with First Liberty? I went to their. I went to their to their luncheon last week. And they are a group that takes cases to the Supreme Court that fights religious freedom of speech cases. And so the little kid that was up there with Trump probably a month or two ago, that his school teacher was making him read a book that says that's titled "My Shadow is Pink," and he, what I'm saying, and they're trying to promote all this tranniness with kids and whatnot, and so they fought back. So they represented him, and they went to the Supreme Court on this matter, and I think that they're scheduled. They're going to have as many as possibly 10 cases represented in the Supreme Court this year. And do you know how many cases the Supreme Court takes up every year out of all the cases they get submitted? 60.
How many?
60.
Yeah. 60
cases a year is the max that the Supreme Court will hear. I think last year they heard 56 or 58, cases in total. And so there's thousands of cases. Yes, Anna, you are right, is 60. Good job. Good job, Anna. 60 is they're not going to, they don't do more than that. So I don't think that another cannabis gun case is going to make it there, because Michael, there could be a big implication if they ruled one way in one case and then they ruled a contradictory way in another case that that was just semi different. And so why would the Supreme Court take up another cannabis gun case if the merits of the case could alter a different judgment? Does that make sense?
Well, it does. And,
okay.
I think that they would, not do so when they do something to be consistent with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that there is inconsistencies throughout the federal courts on this issue.
Yes. Well, that's because you have these rogue judges that don't legislate by the Constitution and regulate off of emotion and different things like that.
They would maybe take this one just to finally set a precedent.
Yeah.
Just to finally establish.
Exactly. That's what I think. Yeah, that's what I think. And I can't wait to see what Clarence Thomas has to say about this.
They'd have to consider medical patients who consume. How do we define under the influence? How are we defining what constitutes when?
I think that might be different in every state, but I don't think that there's a bottom line threshold. But if I was a justice, I would define under the influence of being to where you are not cognitively able to operate in a sane and function normality. They have some type of definition like that. I could see it being worded like that.
The only thing that I really have to compare it to making that.
Go ahead, Michael.
The only thing that I would have to compare it to is current DUI laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in Florida, you can be under the influence to the extent you have a 0.08 or higher alcohol content, or under any other controlled substance to the extent your normal faculties are impaired.
There we go.
That usually becomes a question for the jury, right? And that's typically normal faculties are defined as your ability to hear, to talk, to walk, to answer questions, to judge distances, to do the other normal everyday things that you'd be able to do. if it wasn't for, the substance being in your body. So it becomes a very difficult and fluid standard. And I think, it's not like it's something that we already don't have to deal with weapons and alcohol. People for however many years, I mean, since the 30s, since Prohibition came back, and even before that, people have used and possessed alcohol and possessed weapons. And I think that really we have to create that same type of standard to make that determination. And it's probably more like in DUI cases, I say it's jury, it's whether or not they see it. They see it when they know it, because everyone's seen someone under the influence. Mm-hmm. Everyone's seen someone that's drunk, and they can kind of tell by watching a video whether or not they are or not. With cannabis, it is very much more difficult to do so, because of it's just totally different. People don't necessarily seem impaired like they are in alcohol with cannabis. So I think that this court really has to create a fundamental Second Amendment issue. This all stemmed from the Bruin case that came out of New York, where they went back to these historic principles. But in general, it's pretty clear that in our histories, and when the founding fathers were using it, who were all probably using hemp as well, we're not disarming individuals for using substances when they weren't under the influence of it. So, I think that becomes the very different fine line that courts and police officers and bartenders and things like that may have to determine, or bud tenders, I should say, whether or not someone is under the influence. But it does become a very fluid standard, I think, which becomes the problem. And so many people are against cannabis legalization because we don't have a confirmed test like the breathalyzer to show when someone is under the influence.
Fair enough. What do you guys say, Shaun?
I was just saying, I mean, they would offer blood tests, but that, it will also be inconclusive because some people, especially women, metabolize THC differently, and we don't know enough, and we can't predict what the cliff is for people who consume to a point of normality where it helps you to manage symptoms, but you're really not high. You know what I mean? It's also weird to me that society and legislators are very concerned about people being happy, like being high. I get if you're impaired and driving, large machinery, but there's just this issue of being okay. And what's with that, America? What's the deal? I think America needs some psychotherapy.
Oh man, there's America definitely needs some psychotherapy, but I'm not going to go into that one and disparage anybody. But nonetheless, we're going to roll into our next commercial. And Michael, I think we're going to be shooting up bang bang pretty soon. I think we're about to get our full 2A rights off of this case, but nonetheless, that's just my opinion. And we're going to roll to our next commercial.
Carry in Florida, and
that's what I'm saying, bro. It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge.
Every legend has a humble beginning.
In world news, leaders are gathering today for the annual summit.
I want to tell you something, Che. The government is watching us through the television.
Oh, John.
Look, right there. They're trying to hack into my TV box.
We're still not able to hack into the TV box, sir.
Ha! But they can't.
I've rebuilt the entire electronic system, and it sends and receives signals through quantum phase space. They'll never get in. Engage target.
In other news, local authorities are investigating a series of strange atmospheric phenomena reported by residents.
Ma'am, we're with the federal government. We need to ask you some questions.
John?
Is there a problem? We've been trying to penetrate your TV box for over 6 months.
I told you they were trying to watch us through the TV, but you didn't believe me.
We can't get in, and to be frank, we have no idea what you've created.
Yeah, that's the point. It's called privacy. You know what the Fourth Amendment guarantees?
All we know is that we can't get inside. We want to know if you can create one for us.
QUX. Even the government wants one.
Yeah. Stop whatever you're doing. Make sure you smash that like button. I know we'll appreciate it. You'll appreciate it, and YouTube will appreciate it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And all of the articles that we cover on today's show, you can read directly on our website at www.high9news.com, as well as make sure to check out our 9/11 special video here on our channel. Congressman Kurt Weldon of Pennsylvania and Congressman Dana Rohrabacher of California. It's talking about all the things that happened and didn't happen on 9/11.
Introducing QUX Pay, or simply the Pay app.
Where you can pay like it's nobody's business.
Because it isn't. It's what everyone's been clamoring for. It's finally here.
Secure every payment. Your data stays private. QUX will never sell your data for profit, period. Pay friends, family, contacts instantly. No hidden fees. No limits. Spend on the move.
With this patented technology, you can use debit, credit, bank transfer, cash cards, and even crypto completely offline.
Amounts transferred through the Pay app reach their destination instantly. Transfers in a flash. As quick as sending a text. No more waiting around like crypto. Are you ready for the future of payments? The state of the art for money is finally here.
Data privacy and security protocols trusted by militaries and banks worldwide. QUX Pay, the Pay app.
Available as an app and point of sale system, personal and corporate accounts available. Go to QUXPay.com and start using the Pay app today.
We gave him something like the Treasury Director or something. You know what I mean? Oh, man. And we're going to roll right back on in to Mr. Michael Minardi, who has a second story for us today. And I guess it's kind of out of this world and very trippy. It is none other than Mr. Minardi Law himself, Mr. Michael Minardi.
As you know, we like to have Psychedelic Tuesdays.
Yes. Talk
and
about
it's
it.
a new article out of our favorite country, China. Psychedelics reshape time perception, offering new therapeutic pathways. A perspective article published today in the Psychedelics by Professor Zhong Wang and colleagues examine how psychedelic substances profoundly reshape our perception of time, offering unprecedented insights into consciousness and potential therapeutic applications. The analysis synthesizes existing research on temporal distortions induced by substances including psilocybin, LSD, and DMT, revealing how these compounds provide unique windows into brain function and mental health treatment. Time perception forms the foundation of human consciousness, yet psychedelics can dramatically alter this fundamental aspect of experience. Users frequently report seconds feeling like hours, hours compressed into minutes, or complete dissolution of temporal boundaries. These phenomena extend beyond subjective curiosity, offering researchers crucial data about how the brain constructs our sense of time and self. Neural networks under psychedelic influence. The perspective article identifies key neurobiological mechanisms underlying these temporal distortions. Central to these changes is the default mode network, the DMN, a brain system associated with self-referential thinking and continuous time perception. Psychedelics suppress DMN activity, correlating strongly with reports of time dissolution and loss of linear temporal experience. This suppression appears particularly relevant for therapeutic applications as excessive DMN activity characterizes several psychiatric conditions. Professor Wang highlights how psychedelics modulate and manipulate brain regions simultaneously, the basal ganglia, typically responsible for interventional timing and millisecond scales, shows altered function under psychedelic influence. The prefrontal cortex, which encodes longer time spans and integrates temporal information for planning, exhibits change connectivity patterns. The cerebellum, crucial for precise timing of motor events, and the insula, which links body states with time perception, both demonstrate modified activity patterns. Neurotransmitter systems play pivotal roles in these alterations. Serotonin receptors, particularly through 5-HT2A receptor activation, emerges as the primary mediator of psychedelic temporal effects. The receptor AV activation enhances cortical excitability and increases sensory import gain, potentially explaining why time appears to dilate when processing increases. The analysis also notes dopamine involvement in shorter interval timing disruptions and glutamate participation through NMDA receptor-mediated processes. From dilation to timeliness. The perspective describes three main categories of temporal distortion: time dilation, where brief periods feel extended; may result from enhanced sensory processing as psychedelics, elevate neural oscillations in brain regions specialized for sensory and emotional input. Conversely, time compression, where hours pass like minutes, could relate to intense, intentional focus or ego dissolution, loosening typical perception holds on temporal flow. Perhaps most intriguingly, many users report complete timelessness, experiencing past, present, and future as unified or irrelevant. These experiences often occur within profound mystical states and correlate with DMN suppression. Such states raise fundamental questions about whether lineal time represents a cognitive construction rather than an absolute reality. The officers note important substance-specific differences. Psilocybin tends to produce experience of timelessness, while LSD more frequently induces profound time dilation. These distinctions suggest different pharmacological profiles produce varying temporal effects, highlighting the complexity of neural substrates mediating temporal experience. The perspective article emphasizes therapeutic potential in conditions where temporal perception dysfunction plays a central role. PTSD, depression, and anxiety all involved altered relationships with time. PTSD patients often feel trapped in post-trauma. Depression frequently involves feeling stuck in negative temporal loops, and anxiety features on future-focused temporal distress. Evidence from psychedelic-assisted therapy trials suggest that these substances enable individuals to revisit traumatic memories from detached, nonlinear perspectives. This temporal decoupling allows processing of past experience with reduced emotional intensity, supporting meaning making and integration. Patients describe these temporal shifts as significant factors in symptom improvement. The professor notes that psychedelics may effectively rewire neural circuits involved in both time processing and emotional regulation. By disrupting maladaptive temporal patterns, these substances can facilitate development of healthier time perceptions. This mechanism appears particularly relevant for treatment-resistant conditions where conventional therapies fail to shift entrenched temporal emotional patterns. While acknowledging therapeutic promise, the officers emphasized that necessary ethical considerations and safety protocols. They stressed that administration should occur only in controlled settings with professional oversight, robust informed consent processes, understand potential for profound consciousness alterations, including potentially distressing temporal distortions. The perspective calls for systematic evaluation through longitudinal studies, tracking objective time perception measures and neural activity in patients undergoing psychedelic-assisted therapy. Such research could establish whether temporal perception changes mediate therapeutic outcomes or presents parallel phenomena. Regulatory changes persist, as many psychedelics remain Schedule I, limiting research opportunities. The authors advocate for clearer safety monitoring guidelines and defined regulatory pathways enabling responsible therapeutic integration while preventing misuse. The analysis identifies critical gaps requiring investigation. How do different psychedelics produce distinct temporal effects? What role does neural psychotory, particularity, theta, and gamma oscillations play in maintaining normal time perception? Can specific temporal distortion profiles predict therapeutic outcomes for different conditions? The authors propose that understanding psychedelics' effects on time perception could revolutionize approaches to psychiatric disorders rather than viewing these conditions solely through emotional or cognitive lenses. Incorporating temporal perception as treatment target opens novel therapeutic avenues. The perspective article represents a critical synthesis of the current state of knowledge in psychedelic temporal effects, providing researchers, clinicians, and policymakers with a comprehensive framework for understanding these phenomena. By systemically analyzing and integrating findings from across the literature, the authors offer both a historical perspective on how the field has evolved and a roadmap for future investigations. Some comprehensive studies and reviews are essential for identifying patterns that may not be apparent in individual studies, resolving apparent contradictions in the literature, and highlighting the most promising avenues for advancing the field. The synthesis presented here serves as a valuable resource for both newcomers seeking to understand the field and experienced researchers looking to conceptualize their work with broader scientific landscape, contextualize their work. So I think this is great. It continues to explore the mind and, really expand on how psychedelics work in our body. The evidence coming out on the benefit of psychedelics for so many different mental health treatments has been profound without 99.9% of the side effects that comes with conventional medication. So this is something that we have to continue to fast track in this country and continue to allow people who are suffering from these illnesses to try and use without fear of prosecution and incarceration.
Well, Michael, it sounds to me that on this whole story, it sounds to me like it's all just a matter of time.
It's funny. You know what it reminds me
What's
of,
that?
or the concern, so this whole thing about time and how it's temporal or being in past, present, or future is definitely something that can be explored just on an individual level, certainly. And that the Chinese are exploring it through psychedelics is very interesting. And we would be remiss as the United States to forget that everything that we are running prohibition on, other nations are advancing their science on. And so they'll be ahead of us in that race. Then it also, we don't have to question anything about the temporariness or the perception of time, really, because we've already learned through I used to work for Uncle Sam, so DOD had understood that the Chinese, and now it's very public, that the Chinese had already figured this out because of the scientific developments that they had done in the space of quantum and quantum physics.
Yes.
Quantum entanglement.
They were just showing yesterday that some researchers in the UK figured out a way to actually time travel, and they were able to do it for just a small amount of seconds, but they cracked the code on how to do it. And I'm just like,
I don't know that.
I saw this yesterday on the internet, and I was just like, in all essence, I know how to time travel too. You know what I mean? Because I can travel into the future and I can travel back in the past. All that I have to do is figure out which direction I'm going, because if I travel east, then I'm traveling into the future. And if I travel west, I'm traveling back into the past. And so all you got to do is be able to circle the globe fast enough, and you'll all of a sudden end up in a whole new space and time.
Oh, you're talking about like when you travel by plane?
That's time traveling. That's time traveling, right. Shaun.
These are human perceptions. These are human definitions of time and space-time perception based on the set of physics that we currently understand. And so I love this as exciting that we're still developing this research. Also notice that the thing with time and the correlation of anxiety and PTSD has something to do with fixation and looping. It just helps you break loops, which is great.
Looping's not good in the cannabis space.
Right. by depressing the DMN. But I think what I really hope, like, as the more of this science is revealed and we start to see other nations coming forward with this, that the United States will figure out, the longer we keep these domestic conversations so narrow in scope and focused on prohibition, the further behind we're going to be. And this is not the time as a nation to fall behind.
Well, China. So this study was actually done in China, Michael?
It looked like it was people who are from China who are actually analyzing the data from other studies. So I don't see anything that they were actually giving people or experimenting on people and allowing them, to have those in-person studies, but more a metadata analysis of what's already out there.
Interesting.
But we all know
that interesting. Yeah.
Studies would be conducted by governments undisclosed on all sides.
China. They do have lots of mushrooms out there in China.
I mean, Uncle Sam had its own project. We all know about MK Ultra and everything.
Oh, hold on. The MK projects was a whole series. MK Ultra is just what's most popularized, but there was a whole MK series there was like 20 of them. Oh man, I could go on for days about all of that stuff. That's a whole nother rabbit hole for a whole nother show, maybe even whole nother wormhole. But on that, we're gonna roll into our final commercial, and we are gonna be right back, you guys.
I just ordered the summertime strawberry salad when added steak on top here at Anna's. Make sure you do the same thing too next time you're in downtown Long Beach. Come on down and check out Anna's joint on the 400 block of Pine Street. They have amazing selection of beers, foods, and when you come down here to Anna's, you can even challenge me to a game of shuffleboard if you want to lose. Did you get that? So, next time you're in downtown Long Beach on Pine Avenue, make sure you stop by Anna's Joint on the 400 block. Not only do they have Anna's Joint, this restaurant and bar, but they also have the amazing deli next door, and then next door to that, they have a very exotic flower shop. You may want to stop by and say hi.
And we are back. We are going to roll right into Miss Shaun Salvaje. She's a mom. She's a veteran who served her country proud. And she's a mediator that'll keep you out of having to go into court against Mr. Michael Minardi of law. That's right, it is none other than Miss Shaun Salvaje.
I wouldn't want to go up against his team, that's for sure. Right. My story is all about supply chain. It kind of closes the loop on what we were talking about earlier in New York and this reverse licensing. Mm-hmm. But how do these kind of solutions from the industry come to be? Well, let's take a look at Minnesota. So we're going to go home, my other home state, Minnesota. Y'all don't get mad if the accent comes through. I just can't help it. But Minnesota cannabis dispensaries struggle to stock shelves as supply chain lags behind. It's already taken over. Several adult use cannabis businesses have the green light from the state to operate, but don't have the supply to stock their store shelves as Minnesota's budding industry gets off the ground. Minnesota legalized marijuana for recreational use for over 2 years ago, and the licensing process continues. So far, nearly 60 businesses have received that stamp of approval, with 1,400 others pending final clearance from regulators, according to state data. So a majority of those licensed today are micro businesses with a retail endorsement clearing the way for sales, which was something that the cannabis industry and culture seemed to, we lauded that. We were very excited for the Minnesota market to open. It seemed like it would be more small business friendly. A majority of those licensed today are micro businesses. Mark Ide, who owns In Dispensary in downtown Minneapolis, is one of them. While he was issued the license in August, his store isn't selling adult use cannabis products, only low dose hemp derived THC edibles that have been on the market for years. He told WCCO that's led to a noticeable decline in business and contributed to layoffs. I know for a fact, just based on sheer volume of foot traffic and phone calls, that we would be doing 4 times the amount of business. We should be actually handling about 80 customers per day. Instead, we're handling 2 to 4, because now they'll also have to compete with everyone else, the illicit market. Like, they're set up to fail. We got to fix this. And this is where that vertical licensing, we have to question that stuff. I told WCCO in an interview on Monday, we could hire back the 2 people we had. We could expand our hours. We could hire more people. Instead, we simply can't get product. Right now, there are 2 cultivators licensed with plants that are growing but not yet mature to sell cannabis flower to dispensaries like Ide's. Minnesota also has tribal compacts with 3 tribes, which could grow and sell earlier without a state license because they are sovereign nations, and no disrespect to the tribes. But there are tribal disparities on and off reservations that need supply too. They also need some weed to sell, y'all, because you can't just grow your own supply if you don't have it already running in your state. There isn't enough growing to support everyone. Joel DeAlencar, the owner of Loon Leaf in Blaine, is in a similar situation as Ide and shares the same frustrations. People are incredibly frustrated. Businesses are honestly going to close before they even get a chance to get started. And it's an incredibly expensive industry to get into, especially on the brick and mortar side. I think you're going to see a massive wave of consumers just go to web sales. Eric Abel, the director of the Office of Cannabis Management, in an interview said he anticipated this part of the market rollout would be the hardest, but he remained confident that as additional tribal compacts are executed, and I'll actually have a story on one of those compacts tomorrow, as additional compacts are executed and other businesses begin cultivation, the supply chain will improve. In addition to 2 licensed cultivator businesses, 24 others have preliminary approval, which means they are finalizing the necessary paperwork to get the official okay. But you guys, finalizing paperwork, the runway from finalization, operation, and sales, that's a long period. Tablo estimated that Minnesota needs 1.5 million square feet of cannabis canopy to meet the demand in Minnesota. The state has a fraction of that so far. And it'll have to be a lot of indoor stuff, especially because we have winters in Minnesota. That's going to be an expensive op. There's a lack of product available now, but there's the reality that when you start kind of from nothing and have to build every piece of infrastructure from scratch. And I'm sure many of these business owners also participated in the legislative session that got them good rules, but unfortunately also limited their market a bit too much, trying to protect Minnesota. They're suffering, they're hurting, they're having to close their doors. This quote from Aiden Delankar, let's see, who is it from? Delankar says, it's not just, okay, we have product. It's how are we going to get the product? Who's going to test the product? Is it going to come in bulk? Is it coming prepackaged? There are a lot of other issues that need to be resolved in order to get that steady flow of supply. Taubel said regulators are close to giving final approval to 1 transporter and noted both the tribes and medical companies can transport their own products if they decide to wholesale. We've been hopeful and we've seen early returns that some of the compacts the governor signed with tribal nations will provide access to early supply. But I think, what this article really highlights is that when we're opening individual state markets, we need to recognize that we're introducing hopefully a future player in an interstate market, and you need to keep that alive. It's just like if you're growing, they're the little, you're letting them damp off before they even get out of seedling stage, and it's basic and fundamental. And so I'm hoping that Minnesota can figure it out, but unfortunately it sounds like they're going down the same path as many others. And even when you get good law, it's not going to, if it's limited in some ways, it's not going to actually serve your bottom line. I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. How do we solve this problem? We know that new states need to come online, and we need to protect local operators and give them an opportunity before handing markets over to large-scale, multi-million, some reaching into those billions, money. But we also have to let interstate commerce begin to develop for any of these markets to survive or avoid being completely captured across the nation. We're running into this problem over and over. What do you guys think?
Well, the only solution to this, Shaun, is the hemp market. Just to open and free market. We gotta have interstate trade. We gotta have federal descheduling. That's the only solution to this problem. Other than that, you're gonna keep on having it unless you allow for every state to do what did they call that, Michael? What did they call that in New York? Reverse licensing, a reverse licensing scheme to prevail in the state.
That's not even. I don't even understand what that is, but I think they just got to let it grow.
Yeah.
Let it grow. Stop. Take off some of the shackles.
Exactly.
Let people grow. I mean, there's only 2 cultivation facilities, you said there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that doesn't supply a market at all. It continues to create, the good old boys club, whoever gets into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this is a plant, and everyone should have access to it. And, there should be more cultivators, just like here in Florida. We just have big box cultivators. There's very few micro growers or anything like that, like craft beer exists. This market will sustain it once they let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Minnesota would have been a great space for a craft market to establish, and then also have those backlogs, literally for winter. But they could do the hemp thing, but then they're going to cannibalize the industry that they fought so hard for. And Minnesota flipped before. Minnesota flipped to a legal state before all of these big hemp arguments were being made. So that market is probably very much split, where you have a lot of good operators in both spaces. And I hate to see them fight against each other, especially you heard some of these operators are selling low-dose hemp. And I'm sure Minnesota has made its rules about hemp. I get it.
Let them all
I'm
fight.
in Texas.
Let them all fight. It's the American way.
When we consolidate everything, because it's going to happen.
Let's put the fight on pay-per-view so we can all watch and then be entertained.
The fight is called capitalism. It's what our country is founded on. That's the only fight.
Yeah,
Let
exactly.
these people open up, sell products.
Exactly.
Sell THC products in the medical, AA products in the medical market. I mean, let capitalism survive. It's what our country is based on. And I think that's really done a disservice to these cannabis and hemp companies throughout the country, that it hasn't been like that. I mean, the hemp space, it is like that in many respects, despite the fact that the government limits the type of products that they can sell. But in the cannabis space, I mean, it's shackled by cheap prices on the West Coast. So it's easier to get weed or better quality cannabis in the black market on the East Coast. It just doesn't make any sense anymore that there's this quagmire of what each state can do and dividing lines, and it's criminal for some people, it's not criminal for other people. We're in America. We should be living in the land of the free,
home of the brave,
and plants should be the freest things that they can be. It's just disgusting as to what our government is continuing to do to monopolize this industry off of the backs of farmers. Realistically, they're the ones should be benefiting from this. Another agricultural crop is our farms are getting destroyed throughout this country, growing vegetables and soybeans and corn. It's really messed up as to how we've treated this plant for so long, based on the 1930s rhetoric and media from Asslinger and Mellon and Hearst, destroying this plant because of their investments in other items that were contradictory to those at that time.
Yeah, and the racial motivation. Let's not forget that.
Oh man, always with all of that one.
Well, they were deporting and American citizens in the 30s too. Well, and it was racially driven, and it had a lot to do with
if they were getting deported, were they really U.S. citizens? Otherwise, they'd just be getting arrested.
Yes, they were. They were here before the United States had any of territory.
I don't know about all that. But you know what I mean. We don't got time to get into that one today.
The earth.
Yes. No, we don't have time for history and facts today.
Yes. Time to talk about humanity.
Yes. I'm here for all the facts all days. And speaking of facts, I have one funny, kind of cute story, because I don't understand this story. And I think that this is a kind of a government overreach, the fact that this even has to happen, because I don't understand why businesses can't just do this automatically and why they're making it such a big ass deal. But here we go, you guys, because Missouri, probably the greatest market in the country right now. Marijuana dispensaries may get curbside a pickup option, you guys. That's right. Missouri marijuana dispensaries may soon be allowed to offer curbside pickup service under a proposed amendment published by the state. The Department of Health and Senior Services has released a draft of the proposed amendment and is seeking public feedback through October 28th. According to the draft, customers would still need to pay online for curbside pickup orders, and the curbside lanes would require surveillance cameras similar to existing drive-through lanes. But those guidelines aren't shying people away from excitement, because employees at Vert's neighborhood dispensary said they support the future option. We've got folks who are double amputees who happily come in and chat with us to get their medicine, but it'd be nice to alleviate that service a little more, said Alex Roshitz, the Vibe Check coordinator at Vert's. That's a cute title. Roshitz says a large number of Vert's clients are veterans. And an additional quote, a lot of veterans, a lot of folks are older folks, people with limited mobility for whatever reason. So I think this could be huge for us, he said. We don't have a drive-through at this spot, so it'll be really nice to be able to help some of our loyal customers out here and be able to make things more accessible, he says. Even dispensaries with existing drive-through service and the curbside option could be beneficial. And in a quote, they say, they love it when they pull up there like a drive-through. For me, that's something that's made in movies, said Brandon Grant, the assistant general manager at Proper Cannabis in downtown Kansas City. Grant said he looks forward to telling those same patients that could soon have even more options should the proposal move forward. It's going to help older people, people with disabilities that can't get out of their cars, Grant said. The comment period for this DHSS proposal runs through October 28th, and you can go online and submit your comments. Now, this is the thing. I don't understand why they need this as a proposal. You have a business. How you dispense it should be like, it shouldn't, if you want to do curbside service, there should be no governmental influence saying that you can't operate in that kind of manner. I think it's kind of ridiculous that we even have to have this type of legislation, but I can't wait to hear what you two have to say about this.
All the anti-blowback.
It's so stupid.
Well, it's probably because of how they structured their rules from the jump. They probably made very specific rules about how you could operate your dispensary.
It's so stupid.
You could interface with. I think I remember I talked to JB from Illicit. I almost forgot. JB from Illicit. They're out in Missouri.
Yep.
And there was so much. They had AI interfaces just for customers to be able to come in. Not AI, but computer interfaces. So if you wanted to have that in-person experience, you could. But if you were a routine regular, you could just go in, boop, put your order in, grab it. Because some folks just really want to grab and go. It doesn't have to be a full experience. Like, it reminds me of like some of those little more hippie, it's Austin, you know, a little more bohemian med spa places where they're like, everything's an experience. It doesn't have to be like that all the time. Most consumers just want to get their shit and go. And there was a lot of red tape around that. So I get why they have to do this now, because they wrote laws and rules and regulations that now they have to undo, and they'll have to undo it in a very slow way. But I hope that this passes. It would be great. It is. I agree. We shouldn't write these things in from the beginning.
It's stupid that they even have to do this.
To dispense this however we can, as long as you are selling it to someone with an ID and they can prove they are who they are. That's it, friends. Like, leave it alone otherwise.
Yeah.
But you know, the government.
If you need to walk something out to a patient or to a customer or something, like, it shouldn't be that big of a deal that you have to have a permit or an ordinance in place to be able to make that feasible for someone who's ill or needs the assistance. That is just totally asinine to me, that there needs to be a permit or legislation to allow that type of commerce. It's just freaking stupid.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fun to see how this changed the dispensary model too, because we need to shift away from just being a dispensary, or we need to diversify how we operate them. And you're going to get a whole new, yes, it serves the patients who are maybe handicapped in wheelchairs, need the drive-through experience, but also you're going to get new drive-through consumers that are a completely different demographic of buyers. Like, what do they want? What do they need? You know?
You ever been to like a real trap? You just pull up on the side and someone walks over to your window and hands you a bag and you hand them some money and you're gone.
We're growing up, Jason, and the majority of Americans, if we really want to expand the industry, majority of Americans aren't going to even know what the trap is. Like,
they will.
We have to start thinking.
They will,
just like,
because all these government regulators want to overregulate and overtax, and so the trap is never going to die, Shaun. It's just a reality. Yeah. It's not going to die in our lifetime. The trap will survive.
The trap will survive, but if you're in the licensed industry, you need to evolve.
You need to have a drive-through.
You know, I think hopefully one day the trap won't survive. I mean, you don't really see many traps for alcohol sales, right?
You don't.
You don't see many traps for tobacco sales, and I think this has to go the same way. You know, this is just a product that we need to be age gated, and let's get over it. 21 plus should be able to decide what they want to do, whatever the hell they want, as long as they're not hurting somebody else. And this is no different. And we just have to get over those facts, determine that we do this in so many other industries, and we can do it in this industry. And if we want to go after and we want to regulate it, we do exactly what they do in alcohol. They go in with kids underage and they try to make controlled buys. And if they make a buy and they're successful, the place gets fined or shut down. But this ridiculousness of, everything that's going on and the limits of how you can sell it, how you can display it, it's just stupid. It's just treating adults like kids and not having the idea that, just like we have with tobacco as a society, first they lied to us about how healthy it was and people got addicted to it and they made it look cool. So everyone that did it, now we know, and there's less and less people using it because they know it kills you and it causes these diseases and illnesses. They have to treat humans like we're halfway intelligent and we understand what we want to do for our body that's either good for us or bad for us, and we make that choice. But we have no problem doing it with our food system or our pharmaceutical system, where people don't even have a choice or have knowledge of all the crap that's in the pills and the food that we eat. But yet, here, go ahead, eat it anyway. But we care about you. Really, everything else we're doing is because we care about you. It's just a sack of shit.
It's just a lot of ridiculousness. But it's curbside. Shout out to everybody out there in the great state of Missouri. And thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast. And big shout out to our audience and supporters for tuning in daily and listening to the insanity that is the developing cannabis industry. Huge thank you to Catalyst for helping us keep the lights on. And thank you to our correspondents for being absolutely amazing. Thank you to Cannabis Sativa L for giving us a reason to do this every day. And thank you to Cloud Media partners Elias and Gabriel are somewhere in the metaverse. And thank you all for tuning in and getting high at 9 with us. We are America's #1 daily cannabis news show.